Hello from Portland. Today I'm going to talk about
Knowledge.
marriage. The British House of Commons voted to approve same-sex marriage for the UK. That still has to pass the House of Lords, but it looks pretty likely that that's going to become the law, which will mean that officially the United States is now less progressive than a country with an established church and hereditary monarch. My brother lives in the UK. He and his partner have a civil partnership, but they now have an option of upgrading, I guess, into marriage or keeping their civil partnership. But the point is, whatever they choose, it's their choice now. It's not a choice that's being made for them. And Zachary actually raised in his video about the vote in the House of Commons a question that I think about a lot, which is why people oppose same-sex marriage. One thing that's always puzzled me is not so much why people oppose same-sex marriage, but why people care at all. If you're not directly affected, the amount of energy and money and time that gets devoted by people to fighting same-sex marriage is kind of staggering when you think about how little it directly affects any of their lives. And I should probably make clear up front, not that it will surprise anyone who's ever met me or seen my videos, I think they're wrong. I think the opposition to same-sex marriage is fundamentally wrong. One thing that has helped me to understand this debate a lot better is a school of thought about what are called moral foundations. These are sort of building blocks of morality, and we get different moral codes based on how we mix and emphasize different parts of it. And they're sort of like different notes on a scale, and you get a different tune based on which notes you play louder and when you play them. And the underpinnings are things like harm. We make moral judgments based on whether people are hurt or are helped by our actions. There's also a very basic underpinning of fairness. Is what we're doing equitable? Are we taking more than our share? Is someone else taking more than their share? Then there's an idea of purity or sanctity, that certain things corrupt or contaminate our lives and should be avoided. This is expressed in things like dietary laws. Certain foods are considered unclean. Steven Pinker, who's a neurobiologist, has a great analysis of the purity, sanctity instincts, for want of a better word, that he says are sort of like intuitive microbiology. We have a lot of powerful instincts to stay away from things that seem rotten or that are decaying or that smell bad, to put it very bluntly. Those have a very good foundation in our genetic makeup. It's a really good idea to avoid a lot of those things. And because our brains tend to construct systems, we construct whole systems about how to avoid unclean things, how to avoid contamination, how to avoid corruption. And one of the things that emerges when you look at moral foundations is that liberals tend to put a lot more emphasis on avoiding harm and on fairness, and much less emphasis on things like purity or sanctity. Whereas conservatives are also concerned about harm and fairness, but they put a lot more weight on concerns about purity and sanctity. And I remember another writer who kind of put his finger on this years and years ago, and he was talking about people in suburbs who were generally pretty socially open-minded, tolerant, had gay friends, but were very skittish about same-sex marriage. And the phrase he used was moral entropy. And entropy is a concept of disorder, the idea of things fall apart, the center can't hold. And what he was saying was, it wasn't so much that they thought gay people were bad or immoral or any of that, it's just they felt that somehow this kind of fundamental change would introduce disorder, would introduce an element of chaos into something that was very important to them and to their families. I think these fears are unfounded, but it's important to identify where they're coming from so that we can respond to them in a way that makes sense. And I'll actually talk in a future video about the ways that the pro-marriage equality side has adapted and evolved in response to some of these arguments and become much more effective in a very short period of time. And I think the lesson here is you have to understand what the underpinnings of the argument are. Ultimately, what will really destroy the purity of marriage is trying to keep people out of it. The institution of marriage will become much stronger if it's an option for every couple. If we don't have to create some bizarro world, parallel universe, civil partnership system for gay couples, if everyone can choose to be married or not be married, and for that choice to have the same weight for every couple. Not just as a question of fairness, but ultimately preserving the integrity of marriage. But this is a big subject, and I'll have to come back to it in some future videos, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.